Page 3, House Bill 1049, a bill to amend and reenact Sections 2.2, 2203, and other sections of the Code of Virginia relating to prohibited discrimination, sexual orientation, and gender identity.
The delegate from Loudoun, Delegate LaRocque.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate LaRocque, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I think I generally understand the intent of this bill and would probably agree with many of the things that it seeks to accomplish on a very general basis. I would like to attempt to put a face on this bill that represents who this will affect and how it will affect many, many people throughout the Commonwealth. The story of Peter Vlaming. Just over a year ago, after an open hearing lasted more than 5 hours before the West Point School Board in West Point, Virginia, Peter Vlaming was fired from his job. The 5-member school board, without comment, rubber stamped the superintendent's comments saying that he had been terminated. What did this beloved high school French teacher of 7 years do to warrant this decision? Madam Speaker, members of the body, he dared to stand on his deeply held convictions by informing the school administration that he could not, in good conscience, comply with its directive that he refer to a biologically female student by male pronouns. While Mr. Vlaming was willing to use the student's new preferred name and avoid referring to the student by female pronouns, choosing instead to simply avoid using pronouns, that did not satisfy the school administration, who told him that he must affirmatively use male pronouns for a female student. The administration insisted that by not using male pronouns, Mr. Vlaming violated its recently adopted school board policy to add sexual orientation and gender identity to its non-discrimination section. It's unfortunate that those who demand tolerance the loudest want to push anyone who does not conform. The West Point School Board has introduced a brand new ideology about human nature and insisted that Mr. Vlaming embrace this policy by setting aside his deeply held and constitutionally protected faith convictions. The public hearing was held in the school's chorus room, only allowing 38 members of the public to sit in the meeting. There were well over 100 people who tried to attend the meeting in the middle of that Thursday afternoon. Nearly all of the students and parents were there in support of Mr. Vlaming. During the public hearing, several students testified passionately about the way Mr. Vlaming had always showed genuine care and respect to all the students in his classroom. He had a spotless record with West Point High School, and to substantiate their personal testimony, that is what they would like to have said. In all this, we can clearly see that the addition of sexual orientation and gender identity to non-discrimination policies is not an innocuous move that will merely protect vulnerable individuals. Instead, these policies are being used to punish anyone who does not agree with the ideology of the day and to coerce good people to speak a message and act upon the ideology which they fundamentally disagree with. All this at the threat of their livelihoods. In Peter Vlaming's case, it also meant that his wife and their 4 children between the ages of 1 and 10, had just lost their primary source of income. Mr. Vlaming has since had to sue the school board to hopefully vindicate his rights, but it will in no way, no doubt, mean several long years of litigation and appeals at a cost most people would be unable to pay, and with no guarantee of winning. We continue to see every day good people like Mr. Vlaming having their whole lives uprooted and their reputations, savings, jobs, and livelihoods threatened, not because they did anything wrong or treated anyone with disrespect, but simply because they could not participate in an act that violates their higher duties to God. And as well-intentioned as they may be, it is always policies like this which add sexual orientation and gender identity to laws and ordinances that cause the government to be weaponized against people. In the absence of any concrete data of discrimination on the basis of these characteristics in Virginia, which is proven by FOIA records requested for years, and the inability of proponents to produce even a single real-life example of documented harm on these bases. That alone should be more than enough of a reason to question the wisdom of this policy. But with countless stories of good people like Mr. Vlaming and more in the news every day, these are people who are being targeted and punished because of their sincere faith as a result of these policies. There are compelling reasons for us not to go forward with this bill. We shouldn't want anyone to be victimized or mistreated because of who they are, including sincere Christians like Peter Vlaming. But this policy only guarantees that we will see many more Peter Vlamings in every community in the Commonwealth. This is a solution in search of a problem, and it will only usher in many new problems and many new victims. Please spare Virginia from this. I urge you to vote against this measure. And Madam Speaker, I would just thank you for the length, allowing me the time to make this, tell this story. I would just conclude by referencing the Virginia Statute for Religious Liberty is a statement about both freedom of conscience and the principle of separation of church and state. The words are so important that they are etched on the marble placed in the wall behind me. And I will recite those words, Madam Speaker. Be it enacted by the General Assembly that no man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever, nor shall he be enforced, restrained, molested, or burthened in his body or in goods, nor shall otherwise suffer on account of religious opinions or belief, that all men shall be free to profess by argument to maintain their opinions in matters of religion, and that the same shall in no way diminish, enlarge, or affect their civil capacities. And although we well know that this assembly elected by people for the ordinary purposes of legislation only have no power to restrain the acts of succeeding assemblies constituted with powers equal to their own, and that therefore to declare this act, and I'm reading from the Act of Virginia Statute for Religious Liberties, yet we are free to declare and do declare that the rights hereby asserted are the natural rights of mankind, and that any act shall hereafter pass to repeal the present, or to narrow its operation, such act shall be an infringement of a natural right. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I hope you will not support this bill.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Roem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak to the bill.
Delegate Roem, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that student in West Point, his name is James. I've met James. I introduced James at Equality Virginia's Commonwealth Gala last year, while he stood next to another young woman named Morgan. James is the young man who he is, and Morgan as the young woman who she is. Both of them do know what it's like to be singled out and stigmatized because of who they are. Both of them do know what it's like to be discriminated against in Virginia schools because of who they are. In Morgan's case, she was left out during a lockdown drill where she was not even allowed to go into a restroom or into a locker room, and was left alone by herself during a lockdown drill to prepare as if it was a gunfire event within the school. And she was left with a panic attack. And what did anyone do about it? Well, we're not so sure because we didn't give great guidance in terms of how we should humanely treat a trans girl in schools. And let me tell you, in Peter's case or in James's case as well, when I introduced Morgan and James at the Equality Virginia Commonwealth Gala, and the entire ballroom stood up to applaud them, that was the first time in James's life that since he announced himself to be the young man who he is, that people actually applauded when they heard his name, that people actually celebrated him for who he is. And if you believe in a deity, then you have to understand that that deity made James who he is and made Morgan who she is. And if you don't, then you can just simply understand the words of St. Francis de Sales, to be who you are and to be that well. And the best version that we can be for every Morgan, for every James throughout this Commonwealth is to make sure that they never face the discrimination that they have faced in schools, and to make sure that no teacher, no person ever singles out and stigmatizes a student or any child, let alone adults. And that's why, Madam Speaker, I would simply say some members of this body might not be able to empathize with the plight of a young man like James or a young woman like Morgan, but I can. I was too afraid to be them. I was too afraid to tell anyone who I was because that stigma and that fear is so real. You have no idea what it's like to be Morgan or what it's like to be James. You don't know until you have lived it, until you have cried yourself to sleep over it. No child in the Commonwealth of Virginia and no person in the Commonwealth of Virginia should ever be afraid to be who they are and to be that well and to thrive in this Commonwealth because of who they are, not despite it and not for what discriminatory politicians tell them they're supposed to be. Let's pass this bill.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 59, nays 39, abstentions 0.
Ayes 59, nays 39, abstention 0. The bill passes.
Page 4.